How difficult is Russian? So, I'd just like to apologise first of all because I have taken a few days off from recording. I've been really busy working on some other stuff, so I know this is probably not what you expected going into a video on Russian straight away, but yeah, just for people that watch my channel, I will apologise. I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end, so let's just get straight into it. How difficult is Russian? So, as far as languages go, Russian is the 8th or 9th most spoken language in the world. I did have it as 8th in my previous video, but I've done a little bit more looking into it, and it's kind of disputed, like it's neck and neck with Portuguese, so 8th or 9th, and it has 258 million plus speakers. So it is the official language of Russia, as well as being commonly spoken in the other former USSR states. So if you know your history, or have a passing knowledge of the second half of the 20th century, basically, one of the biggest state in the world, actually the biggest state in modern history, was the USSR, which was Russia primarily, and 14 other countries. So if I can say them off the top of my head, I believe it was Russia, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. That's 12. What am I missing? I'm missing a few others. I can almost get all of them. Sorry. But, yeah. That's where Russian is mostly spoken, in that kind of Eastern Europe to kind of Central Asian area. So Russian is a Slavic language of the Indo-European language family, which gives it some common ancestry with English, very distantly, because they're both Indo-European languages. But because it's not within that Germanic branch with English, it does have significant differences. But as we'll get into later, I've actually got some screenshots of my books where I'm learning Russian. You can see it does have similarities to English in its alphabet and that kind of thing. But yeah, Russian uses its version of the Cyrillic script. So the Russian alphabet is not, it is the Russian alphabet, but what's a better term is script. So a script is basically the actual letters and stuff you use to write something. So for example, the English alphabet, there are other countries that use it, like if you've seen French or Italian, they use the same letters, but you wouldn't say necessarily, it's not technically accurate to say they use the English alphabet, because Italian also has like some accents and all that kind of stuff. German, for example, has an extra letter, and it has the umlaut on a few letters, which is the 2 dots you see above. So they don't actually use the same alphabet, but they do use the same script. It's just modified into each language's alphabet. So the Russian alphabet is for Russian, but it uses the Cyrillic script, which I'll show you on the next slide. Actually, I'll just show you now. This is the Russian alphabet, so it's 33 letters long. It's, as you can see, it does have some similarities to English. So you've got, at the top, you've got A is the same, O is basically the same. I think that's the only two that are basically the same as they are in English. There's a lot of letters that you'll see that are in English, like you can see B, H, P, C. Oh, sorry, T is the same as in English. But yeah, B is actually pronounced V, H is pronounced N, and P is pronounced R, C is pronounced S. So there's a lot of changes. I'm not going to go through the whole alphabet. I'm actually going to make a Russian alphabet video later. But yeah, there are some significant changes, but you can see how it is kind of has a lot in common with, not a lot, it has things in common with the alphabet English uses. So, Russian is an extremely important language politically as well. So obviously, I don't even need to go into that one. That one's fairly straightforward. And yeah, the Russian language is infamous for its cases and pronunciation, so we'll talk about that a bit in the How Difficult Russian Is section. But yeah, it does have some questionable things as far as things you're going to have to learn. And I know that very well because I'm learning it right now. So, how difficult is Russian? Russian is a fairly difficult language overall. It's pretty hard to learn. So it's much harder than any Romance languages like Italian. If you've watched my video on European languages, I've broken down Indo-European languages into their respective branches. And yeah, Slavic languages, which is what Russian is a part of, are a lot harder than Romance languages and Germanic languages. So yeah, it is very difficult. Russian has a case system. It has it has different methods of pluralization, which will confuse you at the beginning, and unfamiliar syntax. So syntax is basically, there's 5 main components that make up a language. You don't have to remember this, but I'll just say it if you're interested. There's morphology, phonology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. Syntax is basically kind of like, it's hard to explain without explaining all 5 of them and without having anything written down. Syntax is basically how sentences go together. Like, a lot of it is word order and just how if you know a little bit about like the subject of a sentence and object of a sentence, that's kind of what syntax is, whereas semantics is just concerned with meaning. This is probably too complicated to get into in a video like this, but I'll explain it another time. And I'm happy to explain it to you in the comments if anyone is interested in knowing. But yeah, Russian is easier than languages like Mandarin or Arabic still, because it still uses a kind of somewhat similar script to English, and its grammar and stuff is not as different to English. Like if you take Arabic, for example, that's in a different language family. It's in the Afro-Asiatic language family, whereas Russian is still in the Indo-European language family with English. So it's closer related than those kind of Asian and Middle Eastern languages generally. Russian also uses a three-gendered system, so you might see that and you're thinking, hang on a minute, that's a bit weird, because we've talked about some Romance languages that have masculine and feminine. How can a language have three genders? Basically, the way it works is you have masculine words, feminine words, and neuter words. So neuter, some people call it neutral. I think I spent 6 months doing that before I realized it's neuter. Neuter words are basically, they're arbitrarily assigned that gender. So just like how languages randomly assign masculine and feminine words, they just assign some of them neuter. It's just how it works. And that basically means that different things need to be inflected in the language. So inflection means when nouns and other words change a little bit based on the grammar. So for example, adjectives, the ending might need to change for masculine, feminine, or neuter words, that kind of thing. It's probably a little bit too complicated to get into actual examples. I probably will make more videos on Russian because I am learning it at the moment, so I do want to kind of document my learning journey. But yeah, Russian uses 6 bloody cases. So this is probably, I'm sure you have heard about Russian cases if you are interested in the Russian language and have already looked at it a little bit. Russian is famous for its case system, and I can actually personally talk about how painful it is. I think on the next few pages I have screenshots of me writing down the case system, so I have notes to go back and look at. Basically what case is words have a particular role in a sentence. So if I say I throw the ball, I am the person doing the action and the ball is what's being thrown, if that makes sense. So you couldn't say the ball thrown I and have the same meaning, because it is different now. So I throw the ball, I am the person throwing the ball. I is in the nominative case. So the nominative case is the thing that actually does stuff. That's one case. In English we have 3, and we don't even really make that much of a distinction between them, so it's not that hard. Russian has 6, and they're very, very different. So if that explanation confuses you, it should. And there's a lot more in Russian. I don't even know. I'm going to show you on the picture, right? I'm going to try and explain that while showing you the picture because it's easier to do. I find it difficult to explain things without having the thing in front of me. But yeah, Russian cases are incredibly difficult. They also differentiate the ending. So as you've probably already seen, the ending can be a little bit different for gender. So masculine and feminine words generally have some kind of ending that indicates it. Russian has different case endings for gender plurality, and sometimes animate and inanimate, which is basically if the object is alive or not. So people are considered animate. Obviously, a book is inanimate. In some languages, like something that is living like a plant can be animate or inanimate. It depends on the language. So yeah, this is really, really painful in Russian. And also Russian stress must be on point. So what stress means is if you take a word like beginning, the stress is on gin in the second syllable. So, like, it's kind of more pronounced. So if you take difficult, you don't say difficult. That would be kind of weird. And you don't say person, you say person. So the stress is kind of where you put the emphasis on in the word. And sometimes when you see people, obviously, that aren't native English speakers coming to an English-speaking country, sometimes they talk a little bit, the stress is on the wrong syllable just because they haven't been exposed to it as long as, obviously, you or I have, because we've been speaking it our whole lives. So, yeah, Russian stress can make the words completely different. So it does need to be on point, otherwise incorrect meaning can be conveyed. But yeah, here is some screenshots of I have like a notebook, obviously, for each language. I practice what I preach. I don't just tell you to have a notebook and then not do it myself. But yeah, so top side, this one here, you've got I've tried to write out the case system. So this is just the 5th and the 6th case. Obviously, I did it for every single one. So the 6 Russian cases are nominative, accusative, genitive, dative, instrumental, and prepositional. it doesn't really matter what order they go in. But yeah, I've got here dative on the left side of the page and instrumental on the right side. And I've basically written above them the pronouns. So pronouns, oh my god, I'm explaining so many things in this video. Pronouns are basically words that take the place of nouns. So if you take I, for example, I is taking the place of your name. You're not going to refer to yourself like, my name's Ethan. I'm not going to go, Ethan does this. When I'm talking about stuff I'm doing, I'm going to say I. So the other pronouns that you commonly have are I, he, she, we, they, you. Those are the main pronouns. There's obviously plenty more. But yeah, you use them instead of saying the name of something, its actual name. So the pronouns in Russian change depending on what case they're in. So they do change a little bit in English, like he, you know how he can be him, so you can say he gives it to him, and it's the same word basically, it just doesn't make sense if you say he gives it to he, it needs to change. In Russian it changes a lot more, and there's 6 different cases obviously. So yeah, that is, and if you look down the bottom as well, the ending of the word changes for what case it's in, so I've tried to write out the endings. If you don't know Russian, looking at that is not going to make sense to you, so don't think you're not understanding it. You kind of would already need to know it to look at that. And yeah, on this side I'm just writing out all the prepositions, so words like to, in, to try and learn them all. There is a lot, so it can be painful. And I've also got top side here, I've got the possessives, so words like his, her, my, trying to learn them in all of the cases. And I've got the adjectives on this side, and then a little bit more of the same thing here. So yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of notes and writing and trying to learn things. So that's a very grammar-heavy approach that I've been doing there. It probably was a little bit too grammar-heavy at the start, but yeah, that was me trying to write out rules so I can go back and look at them and remember them and stuff. By the way, if you do know Russian and you can see those notes and there's any problems with them, please tell me in the comment section below just so I can change them. Those photos aren't, I took them like maybe a few weeks ago, so potentially I have corrected some stuff if there is any stuff that's wrong. But yeah, please tell me if you see anything. But anyway, should you learn Russian? Maybe. I think it is a pretty cool language. It's not for everyone. It's obviously going to be extremely important geopolitically. Like, I've talked to people, some of the stuff people have said is just dumb, like Google Translator will take care of diplomacy, which it obviously will not. I don't even know who said that. I don't know why I associate them with them. But yeah, it's going to be very important. Obviously, with the war in Russia and Ukraine, diplomacy in that Eastern European area is going to be extremely important, and people who can speak Russian are going to be needed basically in that area. But learning Russian will take a significant time investment, so for a beginner language it might not be the best one to pick because it is quite difficult. Obviously, you can do it and it is doable, people have done it before, but yeah, it is quite difficult. However, I will say learning Russian is extremely fun. So as someone who's learnt a much easier language, Italian, Russian is probably more fun just because it's harder, so when you actually understand stuff, it's really, really rewarding. And I think it is just cool kind of writing in Russian and the way the language sounds. So yeah, that's obviously very subjective, but yeah, nailing something that's been really hard is really rewarding in Russian. And I think it will surprise someone if you can speak it, because there aren't, like, just, obviously if you learn French or something, it's not that uncommon, but if you can bust out Russian, that's pretty unusual. So yeah, I think it would be a huge flex and it would surprise people, and it's actually good for your language learning journey because of how many difficult concepts it tackles, like stress, genderization, words changing, word inflection, and also the case system. It has a lot of different things in it, so that'll make you a much better language learner, particularly if you're going into even harder languages like Arabic and stuff. You've already learnt an alphabet, so it's not as difficult to learn an even harder alphabet. But yeah, interesting facts about Russian. It is the language in space. I think I've mentioned this before. Along with English, astronauts aboard the International Space Station must have some knowledge of Russian, just because they have to deal with each other. Russian is also closely based on the Greek alphabet, so really quickly, if you go back to the alphabet, you can see letters like the P making the R sound, and this one here, which is the F sound. It does have a lot of influence from the Greek alphabet. There are just over 900,000 people in America speaking Russian as well, so it is a minority language with a decent amount of speakers, more than you think. And there's also a St. Petersburg in Florida, which I did not know until I read Live and Let Die, the second James Bond book. I thought they were going back to Russia, and then I googled it, and no, they were going to Florida. So yeah, I learned that from a James Bond book from the 50s. So there you go. There is a St. Petersburg in America. Russian patronymic name. So basically, An interesting thing about names in Russian, obviously in most English-speaking countries, people have like a first name, a last name, and then a middle name. Obviously, some people have more than one middle name, some people don't have a middle name. The way Russian names work is your middle name is kind of your dad's name with either Ovich on the end if you're a guy, or Ovna on the end if you're a girl, sorry. So if your dad's name was Ivan and you're a bloke, your middle name would be Ivanovich, and if you were a girl, it would be Ivanovna. So yeah, I think that's just kind of interesting. I probably pronounced that wrong, but yeah, you can look into that if you want to. It's obviously not, it's not going to blow your mind, but yeah, that's just a thing they do. Russian also has 10 vowels and 1 semi-vowel, which is weird. So English only has 5, A, E, I, O, U. Russian has ya, ye, I, o, u, yo, you, ye, ya, and you. I think I've said all 10 of them there. And they also have a semi-vowel ikaretkiya, which is kind of like a Y. It's a little bit interesting. So yeah, a lot of this will not make sense to you unless you actually learn the language and apply it. Me just saying things that the language has will probably be a little bit complex. But yeah, I've already talked about how Russian has 6 cases compared to English's 3. That is a lot more than probably most of the easy languages you would learn. I think German has 4. There are languages that have way more than 6 as well that can be really difficult, but yeah. Russians also omit articles and da, so words like da they don't use. So if you wanted to say I take the train, literally it would say I take train. They don't have words for da and which is it was a bit interesting when I started, but now I'm just used to it. So yeah, that's basically all about Russian. It is a beautiful language, I think, but it does sound intimidating, and it can be intimidating to beginner learners. But yeah, it does pay off in the long run, and I think it is a really cool language to learn. I'll just mention, I wasn't able to post the last few days just because I was really busy. I might be a little bit more busy for the next few days, but yeah, I have copped it in subscribers because I haven't really gained any in the last few days, where I was gaining like 5 to 10 a day before that because I was posting 2 or 3 videos a day. But yeah, as soon as I can get what I'm working on in my life out of the way, I'm a little bit tired at the moment if you can hear that in my voice. But yeah, I will try and get back to it full steam like before. But yeah, if you did want to check out my website as well, I'll have the link in the description for that too. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something.